everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Tamara and here we are again for our second installment on my series on the Eurovision Song Contest. So in our last episode, we talked about a little bit of the history, the origins, giving you a little bit of a background on what the Eurovision Song Contest is, particularly for those who may have never heard of it. And even to inform a little bit the people who actually may think that they know what the Eurovision Song Contest is, but may not know its history or its origins. The reason why I'm doing this series, it's because eventually in our next chapter, I want to give you my review on the 2024 Eurovision Song Contest. But a lot has happened and there are lots of things that are being discussed. And I think I cannot give you a good review unless I explain a little bit the history and what's been happening up until 2024. So we have already discussed that this is an annual song contest. It started for the first time in 1956. One of the inspirations of this song contest was actually the very famous Italian festival Sanremo, which is known as the Italian Song Festival, which is celebrated each year. And it's like an institution in Italy and it's super popular and it's seen internationally. So that was kind of the inspiration to create something similar, but in a larger scale, that can be broadcasted simultaneously and transnationally in different countries, in this case, Europe or Western Europe. We have already discussed that one of the mantras of the Eurovision Song Contest is supposed to be apolitical, which kind of makes sense if you look at it from the point of view that as a transnational broadcasting, very successful broadcasting program, okay, it kind of makes sense. But realistically, and this is we're gonna dive in today on the politics and implications of calling yourself an apolitical event, because if we're going to treat the Eurovision Song Contest just like another song contest or song festival, then okay, it's fine. But that hasn't really been the case. Since the beginning, since its inception, it was thought with the format from a Western European point of view. We have already discussed this in the last episode, but the fact is that since its inception, Eastern European countries haven't really been invited to the party up until they politically challenged and changed their systems. So most of the countries on the other side of the iron curtain wall, basically, the communist bloc, hasn't really been invited to join Eurovision up until the collapse of the Soviet Union and communism in that side of the world. That's when they were finally invited to join in as a welcome to the real and free world. So historically, although they claim to be an apolitical event, haven't really been apolitical, because the politics of your countries and whatever system you were under it was an important thing to whether you could gain entry or not, or whether you could be accepted or not. And it's funny because a lot of people, for example, ask themselves, why do we have countries like Israel and Australia participating in Eurovision? Neither are really European countries. The case of Israel, it has to do with the fact that as they were looking to expand their airwaves towards East, that also included other countries that were nearby but not necessarily European, such as, for example, the case of most Northern African countries. Anyway, they're today part of the European Broadcasting Union because their airwaves are very close by. And that eventually ended up including Israel. And although Israel, it's not a European country, is part of the European Broadcasting Union as well. The difference really has to do with the fact that unlike other Northern African countries that, although as part of the European Broadcasting Union, because of its proximity to Europe, they chose not to be part of the Eurovision Song Contest for political reasons, because they didn't like the fact that Israel was there. So today we have Israel, but we do not have countries such as Morocco, or Tunisia, just to give you two examples. On the case of Australia, well, Australia is not in Europe either, but they have a huge European, it's a country that has a huge European origins, British mainly. And, Eurovision has a great cult following in Australia. So that is the reason why it has been included. Now, you could argue, no, this is a European affair and should remain as such. And I would agree with that, because European countries are not really invited in other broadcasting unions. They're not, and the European Broadcasting Union has been the blueprint for other broadcasting unions, such as the African ones, the Asian ones, the Latin American ones, and so forth, to actually exist in the first place. So, although Israel may be included because of its proximity to Europe, the inclusion of Israel is political, whether you like it or not. The inclusion of Australia, it may seem less political, but, I think it's worth exploring. Why is it okay for certain countries to be around, but not so much for other countries? For a very long time, we have absolutely excluded Eastern Europe. It wasn't up until we thought they were worth to be around that we have included them. So that's the first twist on the so-called apolitical event, because it's not really true. The unfortunate events of 2022, when Russia found itself involved in a military conflict with its neighbor Ukraine, again, it raised a red flag of how apolitical we really are. Well, turns out that when it's convenient for us, we have certain countries, but when it's no longer convenient, for whatever reason that is, we just find an excuse and exclude them. Technically speaking, Russia shouldn't have been excluded. And my understanding that it wasn't really, the original plan wasn't to exclude Russia from both the European Broadcasting Union and the Eurovision Song Contest because of its conflict with Ukraine. Here, I'm not to defend anybody. I'm not here to defend conflicts or no conflict. I'm just basically saying that Russia eventually was excluded because 11 other countries complained about Russia's participations and they threatened to withdraw, which meant politically an economical loss, which eventually led for Russia to be excluded. That seems to be a little bit hypocritical, because when it came to other countries that are also involved in military conflict, which is the case of Israel, yes, there has been the appeal from the public. Some people did complain the presence of Israel, but Israel eventually wasn't excluded. Israel is still participating, and it has created controversy. Now, as I said previously, personally, I don't believe anybody should be excluded. I believe that countries and their entries should stand on their own. But the irony of the controversy of these controversies and the conversation is that apparently European is supposed to be apolitical, to which gives me the impression that politics are at play all the time, but there seems to be a difference between value politics and state politics. State politics basically is what we disagree with when it comes to certain governments or certain people in power, such as, for example, certain politicians. So, for example, Putin's Russia is bad, not because Russia is bad, but because the government in power it's not well seen anywhere else. So it's fine for us to exclude Russia based on that. It's fine for us to exclude Belarus on similar grounds because we don't happen to like Lukashenko. Lukashenko is the last so-called dictator of Europe. And, you know, he teams up with Putin. So you two out. We don't want you in here. But when it comes to other countries, we just play, you know, a blind eye on them. And, you know, to what extent, at the end of the day, Russia sends an entry. That entry doesn't necessarily needs to be politicized, but somehow we make it political. But when it comes to other countries, for example, Israel, we're like, no, you have all the right in the world to be here. I'm not saying that Israel shouldn't be there. I repeat, in my opinion, each country considered a member by the European Broadcasting Union should have the right to join Eurovision. There is no question about that. Now, countries have elected with time not to participate, you know, mostly because of economical reasons. You know, they clearly didn't have the money to send an entry. This has been the case of Liechtenstein, for example, and some other countries like Andorra, and I believe Luxembourg at some point couldn't send entries because they literally didn't have the money, or they didn't think it was important to do so. But still, as members of the European Broadcasting Union, they're invited to join. If they don't want to join, then that's a different story. But when it comes to excluding some people but not excluding others, we are making it political whether we like it or not. So state politics versus value politics. On the other side, it seems that certain values should be accepted even though they're plagued with political symbolism. We talked about last time how entries with time, in particular in the last 20 years, they have been very focused on ethnicity, gender, nationality, sex, and lately sexual orientation. So some people have complained about this overhype on gay branding and gay haven that the Eurovision Song Contest have become lately. And once again, like I said previously, I love Eurovision. I don't care about the politics of Eurovision. I like to sit down and be entertained just like the next person. But eventually it comes to a point that the inconsistencies are so obvious that it's like we often forget that this is supposed to be a song contest. This isn't a platform to show your sexual orientation, because it should be really secondary. It isn't a platform for you to show who's your favorite politician, what your ideology is, what the message is. The song should talk for itself. But lately, that hasn't been the case. So to me, this is a problem because this has a cultural impact. So if we have a very large transnational simultaneous broadcast of things that are supposed to be at the end of the day on the core of family values, because everybody should be entitled to sit down and watch Eurovision. And more often than not, it has become like a spectacle of itself, like a circus act, you know, and this also could be in some way offending circus, because, you know, the circus acts and the circus arts are actually about, you know, talent and about abilities and about, you know, they're just like any other art form. So I don't want to offend the circus people, but all of a sudden Eurovision, it seems to be more about, you know, putting forward a progressive agenda that the Western countries like to be looked at in a way that, hey, look at how progressive we are, you know, and we can show anything regardless of what we're showing is good or not. And this 2024 has been the poster child for politics and being more political than usual, and when it comes to talent, when it comes to the art, when it comes to the song, I don't think I can name one that stood out. But that's the conversation for the next review. But I think it's important that we talk about the politics and the implications, because as something that started as a song contest ended up being something else. The contradictions are constant when it comes to Eurovision. We like to talk about equality and diversity in the West, but to what extent are we really equal and diverse? There is a clear political agenda behind most of what's going today on television, to be fair. This is not only Eurovision. There is clearly, we like to push messages. And Eurovision, it seems to me, that has become like a country branding exercise, you know. Look how superior we are when it comes to our freedom. But the history has proven over and over again that that hasn't really been the case. You call yourself apolitical, but you do not mean when it comes to pushing for certain aspects, you know, of, I don't know. There is a long history of Western acts avoiding Eurovision altogether for its lack of seriousness. And, you know, when we see certain acts that are everything but the art and the song, you can fully understand that. This has also had implications, which we're going to talk about in the next chapter, you know, the seriousness, because some countries haven't sent a serious act for a very long time. And because these acts are not really serious, then they have to somehow create some buzz regarding whether I'm kissing somebody that is the same sex, which is what happened in 2013 with the Finland performance. All of a sudden, it became like a big showcase on supposedly legalizing same-sex marriages, but it comes across more as it doesn't come off genuine. It seems more like for showbiz purposes. You know, and, you know, there is so much to be talked about. I mean, 2014, when Austria sent an openly gay man that ended up winning the Eurovision Song Contest, Conchita Wurst. Now, Conchita is actually a guy. It has a full bird and everything, but it had a wig and it had a dress. So that was impactful for the time. Ended up winning the song contest, which is one way for Western Europe to again say, look how progressive we are. Now, I have nothing against Conchita Wurst. I don't think he's the worst singer in the world. There are people who actually can't sing. I've seen a few clips of Conchita, and she or he, whatever you want to call, Conchita, you know, she comes across like a nice person. I have nothing particularly against her, but it's like, hey, you know, why do we need to go to these extents? You know, at the end of the day, this is a song contest. So all of a sudden, what is supposed to be an apolitical event, it's more political than ever. So that's basically, you know, what we're talking about today, you know, the ongoing contradiction. And this has a cultural impact, guys. Millions of people are watching this. So if all of a sudden we are drifting away from the arts and we are becoming more something else, we have a whole generation of people that watch these programs and may end up thinking that, hey, I don't actually really need talent. All I need to be is shock value. That's all I need to be. And that has implication, guys. You know, we need to talk about this. We can no longer hide it under the carpet, because if you say something, you're homophobic. If you say something else, you're racist. If you say something else, no. If you are apolitical, you need to be apolitical for real. Otherwise, don't brand yourself like that. Don't pick and choose the politics. Don't be at the forefront telling people what value politics we should be abide for and what we shouldn't be abiding for. Don't be at the forefront by saying what state politics we should be abide for and what we shouldn't abide for. You know, this is the deeper conversation about Eurovision. And all of this is to give you a little bit of a background, because in our next chapter, I'm gonna go full front, diving into the 2024 review. And it's not good, guys, but you know, we're gonna talk about it in our next chapter. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background. I wanted to give an introduction, history, origins, politics, and implications, because the 2024 review will make much more sense if you have a little bit more of information. What's been happening since 1956 onwards? It's not only about the development to Europe, but also about the deeper thinking of Europe and the kind of agenda that in particular Western Europe it's playing at nowadays. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in our next installment for the 2024 Eurovision Song Contest review. Thank you very much and see you next time.